two brothers, Joe and Danny, were enjoying their free time by hunting animals in the wild. After the hunt, Joe told Danny that he didn't like his brother Roy's behavior because he was always causing trouble and was often in and out of jail. Roy was often involved in violent acts related to his work as a free fighter. However, Danny still believed that Roy was a good person and that he would quit his job someday. We are then introduced to Roy, who was gearing up to head to the battle arena. Unlike his brothers, Roy is a laid-back, free-spirited guy. 5 minutes before his fight, he still took the time to make out with his girlfriend, Lisa, even though the guests who would be watching his fight that night had arrived and were waiting for him. As usual, Roy, who was a former soldier in the Special Forces, could easily overpower his opponent. When Roy managed to knock out his opponent, he returned to his girlfriend and landed another kiss on her. But unexpectedly, his opponent had not really been down. And since there were no rules in this match, his opponent got up and turned the situation around. Because of his arrogance, Roy's boss Julian was very angry. He then ordered his men to arrest and punish Roy for making him lose $10 million. Julian, a ruthless mafia leader, then said that for the past 4 years he had never experienced defeat. Julian assumed that Roy's recent performance had declined because he was having too much fun with his girlfriend. Therefore, he had to be punished. Julian then killed that poor woman right in front of him. Afterwards, Julian took Roy to some place that turned out to be a warehouse, where he hid kilograms of rare diamonds that he got from the mining land. Julian ordered Roy to take those diamonds to a place he called Point A and Point B. If Roy succeeded with the mission, then he would be paid $1 million. The tempting offer made Roy both interested and surprised, wondering why Julian even assigned him while he had dozens of fully armed men. Julian then revealed the reasons. He considered that Roy was the right person for the mission because he had qualified driving skills. Other than that, Roy also has 2 brothers who have a background as soldiers and might be able to help him. The last reason was because Roy had caused him a big loss. Julian also threatened Roy that if he refused the job, he would not hesitate to kill his brother Joe, his sister-in-law and his niece. Still confused, Roy called Joe. However, as Joe was still upset with him, he didn't answer Roy's call. The next day, Danny, who was still actively working as a soldier, was confused because he could not contact his brother. Danny then decided to meet Joe at his house. Arriving at Joe's house, he found his brother busy training his horses to race and some of his pets. After these 2 brothers met, Joe told Danny that last night Roy called him, but he ignored the call because he was still upset and fed up with his behavior. Danny regretted his brother's decision for not answering Roy's call, saying that maybe Roy was in trouble and needed their help. After all, Roy was forever their brother who had to be treated well, even though he often gave their family a hard time. After previously failing to call Joe, Roy then went to Joe's house, and his arrival was warmly welcomed by his niece and sister-in-law. Danny, who was also there at the time, then came to Joe, who was still busy taking care of his horses. Danny told Joe that Roy had come, and he hoped the 2 of them would reconcile as a family. But Joe, who knew well about his brother's nature, would no longer want to deal with him, as he only came when he was in trouble. Roy then decided to leave Joe's farm, and before he left, he asked Danny to go with him and join him for the next few days. Danny accepted Roy's suggestion, considering that the 2 of them had not seen each other for a long time. Before the 2 of them left, Danny asked Roy to explain exactly what he was doing. During their trip, Roy explained that he was in big trouble. He was assigned to be responsible for delivering a very high-value item. He also said that the goods belonged to a very dangerous mob. Therefore, they had to work according to the conditions set by the mob boss. After a long and exhausting journey, Roy took Danny to an underground fighting arena that was run by his friend. They then watched an exciting fight between 2 top fighters, Barney Boy against a huge man named Big Duke. The match was won by Big Duke without any significant fight from Barney Boy. After Big Duke won the fight, Roy came forward to challenge him. As it turned out, Roy had beaten that big man in the freestyle ring in the past. The following day, Roy and Danny continued their trip. On that day, they would head to a place to pick up a supply of diamonds and deliver them to a predetermined place. When Danny and Roy arrived at the diamond storage warehouse, they were greeted by Polly, Julian's right-hand man, who was assigned to guard the warehouse. Polly then explained to Roy that the diamonds had been packed in drink bottles in order to trick the police. After a tiring drive, Roy and Danny stopped at a convenience store to rest and buy some food and drinks to replenish their energy. A few moments later, it happened that a group of masked men in full gear arrived at the mini-market and committed a robbery. A shopkeeper was killed on the spot after receiving a brutal barrage of bullets fired by the masked group. Little did Roy and Danny realize that the robbers' goal was to steal the diamonds they were carrying. Sensing that he had been framed, Roy fought back by shooting at the robbers. However, his fight was in vain. Being a fighter, Roy would not just give up. Together with his brother, they chased them by driving a car that they managed to steal from the store's parking lot. Danny began to feel suspicious, so he asked Roy what exactly they were carrying and who those people were. Roy did not answer Danny's question, and he remained focused on chasing the robbers. The large number of opponents they had to face forced Roy and Danny to stop the chase. For the second time, Danny again asked Roy about what exactly they were carrying. Having no more choices, Roy finally admitted the truth. He explained that what they were carrying were hundreds of diamonds worth around $50 million belonging to a ruthless mafia boss. That evening, Julian received a message that Roy and the diamonds had not arrived at the designated appointment. Julian was furious, and he assumed that Roy was playing games with him by stealing the diamonds. A fact is revealed. It turns out that the robbers who stole the diamonds were Polly's men. He deliberately robbed the diamonds from Julian's hands and framed Roy and Danny as the culprits. Roy and Danny had to walk to the city because the car they stole was damaged and could no longer be used. Roy then said that he had to get the diamonds back as soon as possible before Julian got angry and killed Joe's wife and daughter. We cut to Joe, who has just returned from grocery shopping. When he arrived at his house, he couldn't find his daughter and wife. They had disappeared, who knows where. Joe's daughter and wife have been kidnapped by Julian, because before, Julian had made them collateral if Roy didn't manage to complete his task. Roy and Danny eventually arrived at a certain area, and there, they managed to contact Joe, who was still in shock because his wife and daughter had suddenly disappeared. Roy then said that the disappearance of his wife and daughter was Julian's doing. He promised his brother that he would bring back both his wife and daughter as soon as possible. Roy then contacted Julian and explained what had actually happened. Julian thought Roy had betrayed him, so he threatened him to bring the diamond back within 48 hours, otherwise he would kill Joe's wife and daughter. Danny was very angry. He then left Roy because he had lied to him and endangered their family. But in the end, Danny was able to calm himself down and come back to Roy. He began to think about finding a solution to the problem they were facing. He said that he would help his brother avenge what those mobsters had done. Unknowingly, two police detectives, Johnson and Garcia, were watching them from the top of the hill. They were investigating an illicit business run by Julian and his gang. Meanwhile, Joe did not stand still. He was determined to find his daughter and wife. He prepared his weapon and soon joined Roy and Danny. When he arrived at the place where his younger siblings were, Joe attacked Roy in an outburst of emotion that had been pent up for a long time. From a distance, Johnson and Garcia continued to watch them and waited to see what they would actually do. Later that day, Julian sent a photo to Roy, showing Joe's wife and daughter being held hostage by him. Not wanting to waste any more time, Roy took his two brothers to Julian's headquarters to save Joe's wife and daughter. The following day, they arrived at the Mafia headquarters, led by Julian. As a former soldier who has deadly tactics and movements, Joe took action immediately and eliminated a number of guards there. Once the situation was deemed safe, Joe and Roy entered the headquarters to rescue the hostages, while Danny served as a sniper to protect the movements of his two brothers. The battle did not only take place outside the headquarters, because it turned out that inside that building, there was also a commotion between Polly and Julian. Polly finally confessed that he was the one who had robbed the diamond from Roy's hand. He did so because of his resentment towards Julian. The diamond business actually belongs to Polly's family. He felt that Julian, who was only the adopted son of his uncle, was unfit to lead the business. The commotion outside distracted Polly's attention, and Julian seized the opportunity to knock Polly out. Joe and Julian finally met. They faced each other and raised their weapons. Unexpectedly, the bullets from each weapon they held ran out, so they decided to duel one-on-one with their bare hands. Julian, who had a bigger build, was easily able to knock Joe down. Thankfully, a few moments later, Roy came to his brother's aid. Roy pointed a gun at Julian, but the sound of Julian's yelling made him tremble. Julian took the opportunity to beat Roy severely. Unexpectedly, Polly, who was lying on the floor, rose again and fired his gun at Joe and Julian repeatedly. He was convinced that Joe and Julian had died from his shots, so he then ordered his men to take Roy. Before he knew it, Joe was actually still alive. Having lost contact with his two brothers, Danny decided to go inside the base. Once inside, he found Joe. Joe managed to survive Polly's shot thanks to the bulletproof vest he was wearing. They then rush after Polly, who has taken Roy away with him. Danny then called his colleague in the military named Jimmy, and asked for his help in bringing the weapons they needed to destroy those mobsters. We shift to Polly, who has reached a place guarded by armed forces where Joe's daughter and wife are being held hostage. Polly had Roy fight with his best fighter, and the stakes were Joe's daughter and wife. If Roy managed to win against his fighter, then he would release them, but if Roy lost, then their lives would not be saved. For the sake of the lives of his sister-in-law and niece, Roy must face Polly's fighter. Since he was already exhausted, Roy was unable to keep up with his opponent's strength. Over and over again, his body was beaten and slammed. Around the same time, Danny, Joe, and Jimmy had arrived at the location after they had previously managed to track the location of Roy's cell phone. From a distance, Danny, as the sniper he is, was able to easily eliminate Polly's two guards with a shot right on their heads. On the other hand, Roy continued to struggle to deal with his rival, but thanks to all the strength he exerted, he was finally able to recover. He succeeded in taking down Polly's top fighter, as well as Joe, Danny, and Jimmy, who managed to finish off Polly's men one by one. In the end, Joe managed to save his daughter and wife. He cornered Polly, who was about to run away. However, the police arrived just in time before Joe managed to kill him. Shortly after, FBI agents arrived to arrest Polly and confiscate all the businesses he ran. Agents Johnson and Garcia thanked Joe and his two brothers for helping the FBI catch the criminals. At the end of the story, Joe and Roy's relationship got better again. Roy decided to quit as a free fighter and was going to help Joe take care of the ranch owned by their family.
If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. You should watch the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more video like this.